Welcome to another intrusive episode of Beer and Politics. We are your space-happy host. He's Ryan. I'm Ryan. Today we're talking about tipping. Not of the bovine kind. But of course, before we do, Madam Brewmaster, what do we have on tap?
Today we're drinking Barmy from Ballast Point.
Barmy from Ballast Point Brewing. This is a golden ale with apricot and honey. Golden ale, as you can see, should have a lovely golden color. Be pretty light. Easy to drink. What are your thoughts?
So great color. I'll start with the scent. First of all, the scent is nice. I actually don't smell a lot of the apricot, however you pronounce it, or even the honey. As far as taste goes, I actually have a bit of a tinge of a tang to it, which I was surprised by. I actually don't think it's as sweet as Madam Brewmaster might have said.
Interesting. I actually get a lot of the apricot notes in my scent. I think it smells pretty good. It is a sweeter beer. It's not intrusively sweet. I also want to point out this thing clocks in at 12% alcohol.
Oh my gosh.
So
we might derail.
So it's a good thing this is a happy hour special and a shorter episode than normal.
Yes.
But overall, I think it's a pretty tasty beer.
Yeah, I'd like to keep drinking it and let you know at the end, but right now I'm liking it. We'll see how it ends.
It's true. I'm going to start, because I think we should give it a rating at the end. I'm going to start with 3.5, 3.5.
3.5 what's?
3.5 tipped cows.
Okay, I'm going to go with, I think it's quite good. Right now I'm going to say 4 Angus Youngs.
Ooh, nice.
That's a play on cows.
Well, thank you to Ballast Point Brewing, who doesn't sponsor us. Barmy.
It's pretty good.
Yeah.
So far.
Yeah.
All right, so we are talking about tipping. We're talking about tipping your servers, tipping your postal workers, tipping in general. This is something that I've been interested in for a while. Some people have referred to me as Mr. Pink from Reservoir Dogs. If you haven't seen it, go see it right now. You'll thank me for it. But it's not really political in nature, but there is some political underpinnings here, especially as we talk about minimum wage and increasing the minimum wage. And what does that do to our tipped worker industry? And the first question I have for you, Ryan, is why do we tip people anyway?
Well, there actually is a historical reason, as there almost always is.
Okay.
The tipping industry started in the restaurant industry, the service industry, and actually a lot in the rail industry with the advent of the passenger car and as rail transit came to be more and more prominent. What we see in that time is that restaurant owners wanted ways to keep their business costs low, as did rail car operators. And at this time, this was shortly after the freeing of the slaves, there was an influx of laborers into the workforce.
Okay.
Now, many people, because as we've talked about relentlessly, everyone was racist. And a lot of people had problems with paying black people. And so, a tipped wage allowed you, as an owner, not to pay a black person or pay them extremely poorly and have the tipping fall onto the customer. So if you did a great job or if you did adequate, it would be reflected appropriately. And I want to point out, actually on this subject, I've heard a lot of people, especially liberal people, talking about how because it had its roots in this sort of racist, these racist roots that by default, it is a bad system. And I disagree. And that doesn't mean I disagree with tipping as a whole, but I disagree with its roots being this means it's automatically bad.
So were they more likely to have given them a menial wage plus the tips, or would it have just been just the tips?
Usually it would be just the tips.
Okay.
Or if it's a menial wage, it's really, really menial.
Okay. All right, that makes sense.
And there's actually a couple of examples that I would like to give to show why I don't believe that its roots necessarily mean it's bad today.
All right, go for it.
Number one, Volkswagen and the Beetle. It was designed and used primarily to transport Nazis around Germany.
Okay.
Doesn't mean that it's bad today.
Gotcha.
Another one, Mitsubishi Motors.
Yep.
They actually designed engines for airplanes, specifically kamikaze airplanes, for the Japanese. Doesn't mean Mitsubishi's a bad company today. And specifically for you liberals out there, because we know we have gluts of liberal followers.
I don't know what glutz is, but sure.
I'm just going to say it means a lot.
Okay.
But we have all these liberal followers. How about this? Planned Parenthood.
I knew you were going there.
Yeah, Margaret Sanger, she was a eugenist. She practiced eugenics. She believed that it was a good idea to help curb the dumb black population by not allowing them to reproduce or helping them not reproduce. But just because it was formed that way doesn't mean that's where they are today.
That's right. We're going to have at least a happy hour special on Planned Parenthood coming your way.
It's true.
Because we haven't actually discussed how we feel about it, at least mutually. But that's a good point.
Thank you.
And actually, that's a good point for any point that we're making, especially something today. Even if we do modern times, when someone says, I don't like this because of the way it's used, it doesn't mean that the thing is bad.
Right.
Right? It's the way it's being used is bad.
Sure.
All right, so now the question then I guess I have for you. We understand why it existed and kind of why it's carried over today. The question is, are we implementing it appropriately? And what I mean by that, so my challenge, the reason I take great interest in this, is because it feels like an obligation now, right? So when you go to a restaurant, you feel like a jerk, assuming you're a good human being, if you don't give a good tip. Just period, right? Because you know the person's looking at that and they're saying, oh, this guy's a bad tipper, so you want to give a good tip.
And it's my livelihood. He comes in here knowing that he's supposed to tip.
Right. Well, in theory, it's your livelihood. We haven't really talked about that. But it feels obligatory, but it also feels arbitrary. So in that, they tell you it's 10%, 15%, 20%, 25%. They give you this at the bottom of receipts, at least in California now. I don't know if they do it everywhere. But they give you these percentages, and it seems to be based off absolutely nothing that I can tell.
Sure.
And so I think you have some information for us about how people are tipped and what minimum wage is in certain states and things like that. So that makes it feel even more arbitrary. So if you can kind of expand on that.
Yes. So the national wage for minimum wage workers, the national minimum wage for tipped workers is $2.13 an hour. And of course, that's on a federal level, so various states can have more. They can't have less, but they can say, in our state, it must be X.
Yeah.
Local jurisdictions, cities can do it as well, towns can do it, counties could do it if they really wanted, but we're looking at state level really here, and I actually have a graph that shows you where these people are, so we're going to throw that graph up on the screen now. Boop. And you can see that it is wildly different across the states. Some of these states have the federal minimum wage, some of them have their own state minimum wage, and some of them have something in between. It's above the federal, but below the state minimum wage. So there's not really a rhyme or reason across this country as how that works out.
So then we're left with our 15, 20, and 25%, no matter what the minimum wage is. And that's what makes it feel arbitrary. And that's something I personally have a problem with, and that's why people call me Mr. Pink. So my question for you is, do you have any thoughts on how we should do this? Or are you not concerned at all, and it is what it is? I don't know.
So I do have some concerns.
Okay.
Mainly, when you look at, especially on that graph, you look at California, and you look at Virginia.
Sure.
Now, Northern Virginia
there you go.
has some of the highest living costs in the country, period. Comparable with Los Angeles, comparable with Orange County in California.
Yep.
And Virginia is $2.13, and California at this point I believe is 11, it may be 10, but it's 10 or 11 bucks an hour. And
4 to 5 times more.
Right, and we're saying that you should tip the same amount in California as Virginia, even though now one is making a minimum wage and the other is making clearly a substandard wage.
So I'm going to put you on the spot here.
Okay.
Because I'm glad you brought this up.
Okay.
What's your problem with that?
My problem with that is it's the exact same job.
Okay.
And if we are to say that the purpose of tipping is to provide for their livelihood, then isn't that the minimum wage?
Very good. So I kind of want to make him look like the jerk here.
He's the one that looks like the jerk most of the time.
Yes, so. I try to be the jerk. But I want you to look like the jerk here, because what we're talking about is how our hard-earned money is going towards somebody else's job.
Sure. Okay.
Right? So the people in California are making 4 to 5 times more than the people in Virginia.
On an
and
hourly.
I'm expected to tip them the same. And I have a job where I make money. And I'm giving someone who's making 4 to 5 times more money the same in tip and gratuity. And it feels like, now I'm going to make me a jerk because you didn't actually say this, but it feels like I'm just arbitrarily throwing my money away to somebody else.
And I'd like to point out, when the minimum wage went up, let's say, do you really think that the employers, that these businesses haven't calculated that extra cost into the cost of the food that you're buying?
Right.
So of course, I mean, you can't just give everyone a raise without it coming from somewhere. It's either going to come from profits, or you're going to keep the same profits and you're going to raise your costs.
Yep.
Most likely, people are going to raise their costs, and that is calculated into that bill that you get.
And by the way, we haven't talked about this at all, so
No.
I could be wrong.
We haven't.
On this particular piece especially.
Okay.
I could be wrong because I was thinking about other minimum wage jobs, right?
Yes.
So the argument against increasing minimum wage is that they have to increase their costs. And that's where big business comes in and kicks out little business.
Sure.
Here's the thing about the restaurant industry. The cost of food is the cost of food. All right. The talent and the skill in making the food and preparing the food, that's the difference in the industry. So there's the big chain restaurant coming in and selling food for cheaper. They're not selling food for cheaper. They're selling the prep for cheaper. They're selling the skill for cheaper. So you should be, assuming you're making better food, be able to increase the cost against that chain restaurant and still stay afloat.
Sure.
Right? All right, so do you have any suggestions about what you would want to see out of minimum wage or tipping or both?
I actually think that we should get rid of the tipped wage period.
Okay.
I think that it is a relic that can't be appropriately. I think it's not something we can appropriately do. Think about this, and here's my reasoning.
Okay.
So, $2.13 has been the federal minimum for, as far as I can remember,
forever.
probably 10 or 15 years, something like that. And cost of living has gone up.
Yep.
And everything has gone up, and that 15% or that 18%, because when I was growing up, I remember 15% was kind of the standard, and 18 was really good.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But now, 15%'s on the bottom side.
Yep.
And because keep in mind, cost of living has gone up.
Yep.
But the price that they're getting paid hasn't gone up. Mm-hmm. So restaurants are paying them less based on inflation. And so we are now paying more and more and more out of pocket for these things. I think it's a relic of the past, and I don't think there's a reason to have it.
So you would then say that let's just stick with restaurants for the time being. So a server is at least a minimum wage job.
Correct.
And it could be more depending on where you're working, what they want to pay you.
Sure.
But if we increase the minimum wage, that should be fine for you.
Yes.
Right? Okay, so I have some thoughts on this. So
Okay.
I said I've been thinking about this a long time. And I actually came up with what I thought was a simple way to figure out tipping. But because I didn't write it down, I can't adequately explain how it works. But basically, you're tipping for a service being provided, right?
Yes.
And so when we talk about going to restaurants, it essentially equates to how many times is that person coming over to you? Are they bringing something? Are they asking something? And then you figure out the tip based on that, because we're talking about the service.
Sure. It's called the service industry.
Exactly. And I think that I agree, and let's increase the minimum wage to a living wage, or to what Ryan better states as the cost of labor, the value of labor. It's a absolute line that we can draw. It's kind of arbitrarily drawn, but it's absolute in that somebody puts in the time. This is the minimum that they're going to get paid for the time. Mm-hmm. All right, so let's increase it to whatever that is. Right now in the United States, we're looking at $15 an hour is the goal. Sure. Right? Whether or not that's true or false, I don't know. But that's the goal.
Whether it's overly arbitrary, maybe.
Yeah,
but
maybe.
That's the number that's being used.
Now I'm just going to throw this bomb out there because people have brought it up before. If you're currently making $15 an hour and you compare yourself to somebody else who's doing what you feel is a lesser job, the problem isn't with them, it's with you, and maybe you should be making more money.
Yeah.
That's the key here, right? It's not demoting them, it's promoting you. If you're doing a better job and a better service in a more highly skilled, more highly talented, more highly necessary industry, ask for more money. Don't make somebody else's light dim just to make yours shine brighter.
Yeah, I like that.
Thanks, I didn't make it up.
Well, that's okay. You can still take credit for it.
Mm-hmm.
No, but maybe you haven't considered that you should be making more money.
Yeah.
Maybe your job and your time actually is more valuable than what you're getting.
Correct. So now, Now that I went through that complicated, you bring me stuff, whatever. This whole happy hour special, by the way, is not going to be overly enlightening to you, but I still want to talk about it. So now that we've kind of talked through it, I was talking to one of my service providers, my barber, and we were talking about the minimum wage. And my biggest issue is with the obligation and the standardized 15, 20, 25, whatever percentage it is, across everything. It seems like. Okay. Most of us don't actually know how to tip, but across a lot of things, we go, oh, it's 15, it's 20, it's whatever percentage, right? And I said my issue is if I go to a chain restaurant and I buy a $10 meal and I buy a $5 drink and it ends up being $18 with tax and I pay 20%, that's $3.60 I'm giving to that person. If I go to a fancy restaurant and I buy a meal and I get a drink and it's $100, they're making, if I give 20% tip, $20 for, in theory, the same service being provided.
I would say it could be literally the same thing.
It really could be. And that has been a problem to me. And while we were talking about it, I said, you know, I can't imagine someone bringing me food and a drink and asking me what I want making more than $50K a year. That's what I said. To me, $50K, right?
Okay.
Because some of these people, I mean, if you really do math at expensive restaurants, these servers might make six figures. I mean, I haven't asked them, but you can do math and you count number of tables, you count 20%, you count all these things. They could be making six figures and you're saying to yourself, for what? To bring me food, to bring me a drink, to ask me what I want. And so I said, to me, no more than $50K a year. And that's wrong. That's wrong, Ryan. We've talked about this. We talked about this in minimum wage discussion. We've talked about this, in various videos and episodes. And the reason it's wrong is it's not my business what they make a year.
Right.
And I fell into that trap. If you're going to be objective, we lean left. I mean, we like to think we're reasonable and objective, but...
I like to think we're all of those things.
Yes, but it tends, if you're going to start labeling things, we tend to lean left. This probably is... That was a very conservative right-wing thing for me to say, is that they aren't worth this. Right. And that's because of the obligation and the arbitrary percentage. That's why I feel that way. So I need to rid myself of that, and we need to think about, well, what does a tip look like? So if you do minimum wage, I'm okay with tips, all right? But we should move past this idea that it's actually sustaining somebody's level to live.
Right.
Right?
Put the burden on the employer instead of
to provide the value to the people buying the goods and services, right? So what do I want to see out of tipping? And I think it really is as simple as, what is the value to the thing that they're doing, that service being provided? So I like this, especially in this example with pizza delivery people. Right? So most of us, I don't know how we mostly do it, actually. I don't know. You tell me, do you do a percentage or do you do a flat rate per pizza? What is your thought?
For a pizza delivery guy, I actually do a flat rate.
Okay. Per pizza or?
No, flat rate.
No matter how many pizzas?
I was going to say, if I have a big party and it's a giant order, then I will do more.
Okay.
And the logistics behind that is you can only carry so many pizzas with you.
Okay, perfect. So you do a flat rate. And I think that's okay. But what I'm going to prescribe here, and it's not as simple as I'd like it to be, but it's what is the cost of that service being provided. And a great way to figure this out is how much would you pay your friend to do that service? Okay, so if you're sitting at home on the couch with your friend Ryan, who has a great name because it matches yours, and you're both sitting there and you say, I really would like a pizza, but I don't want to go get a pizza. And I say to you, I will pay you what amount of money to go get that pizza for me? That's probably what you should tip the person. Whatever you're willing to pay that person to go do it. Yeah. And again, consider they're your friend because you like your friend and you'll probably pay them more than you pay a normal person. And maybe you expect them to do it for free, but that's stupid. Stop that. So, so what is it you would pay your friend to do it? And then you go out to a restaurant. And this actually helps from those who are trying to figure out tipping, especially on the high-end restaurants. How much is that experience to you? Because on the low-end restaurants and the high-end restaurants combined, someone's going to come ask you for your order. Someone's going to bring you drinks. Someone's going to bring you food. What is that? What does that cost you? And you know what? You can be reasonable and logical, and you can be cheap. And I'm okay with that, especially if we've raised your minimum wage. Because, you know, if you said, I'd literally pay someone 25 cents to bring me a drink. Okay, that's the tip. Sorry, that's the industry that worker is in, right? We've increased you to the living wage. Now you get 25 cents. But, in theory, when you go to an expensive restaurant, they have more people doing more things.
The experience is inherently different.
It is inherently different. And you know what? It turns out a lot of times 15 or 20% will probably align with what you're willing to pay. But at an expensive restaurant, it may not. And the point about the obligation is you shouldn't have to feel like a jerk to sit there and say, this wasn't worth it. And have them to have the expectations to say, you owe this to me.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm saying. What was it you would pay your friend to do the things you're not doing when you're going out to that experience? Because when you're going to the fancy restaurant, most of the time, if you're me, I'm only going for the food. I'm actually not going for the experience.
Okay.
I am only going for the food. But I tell you what, you wow me with an experience, that's great.
Ryan, food can be an experience.
And that's why I pay $50 for a steak.
Right.
That's the experience.
It's true.
But I'm not going to give you 20% for the steak. I paid for the steak already. So what I want to say is, what value did you provide me? And you know what? Fancy restaurants tend to provide better value.
Sure.
But I don't want to be hooked into 20% on $100. Because let me do some math real fast if you're not paying attention. Table of two, fancy restaurant, $50 steak, 3 glasses of wine per person. They're
Nice.
Ubering home, by the way. Three glasses of wine per person. Let's say each glass of wine, $15. All right. So $45 plus your $50 steak, $95. Let's round up to $100 for fun.
There's 2 people, though, so 2 steaks.
Yep, 2 steaks.
you're
$200
talking about-
for a 2-person table. That's a $40 20% tip. Let's say that person is working 4 tables. Mm-hmm. And
How long are you there?
And you're there for 2 hours. That's $80 an hour. $80 an hour. That person is making 100. If they worked 8 hours and they had that going on, they're making like $165,000 a year.
Let's say that
Which is fine, by the way,
Yeah.
if that's what you want to tip them. If that is the service they're providing. But if it's not, and you're just paying because the food is expensive, you're getting screwed, and it's your hard-earned money, and that's why they call me Mr. Pink.
And I want to say, if we were able to raise the tipped wage to a living wage, it doesn't mean you don't tip anymore necessarily.
No.
You tip if it's a great service. If someone's great and they do a great job, because I have been to places that have shitty service.
Yep.
And I've been to places with fantastic service. And you know what? I do feel like a dick if I'm not tipping 18% for that shitty service.
I do too. Well, because you know what? Could have been a bad day. They could have
could
been
have been a
screwed
bad
by
day.
any number of people, by the way.
Of course.
Yep, so let's get it up so we don't have to feel bad for saying, you know what, you did the bare minimum today.
Yeah.
And you know what the bare minimum is? Minimum wage.
It's a living wage.
It really is. Any more thoughts? Last call?
Cheers. And one question for you, though.
Yeah.
What do you think of the Barmy?
I like it a lot. It turns out that tang kind of went away. I still have it, but I think the honey and maybe apricot has mellowed it, and I'm going to tell you, I'm feeling it a little bit. I haven't eaten lunch today, but it's good. I like it. Go out.
And it's
Go out
probably
try it.
3 or 4 o'clock at this point, by the way.
Yeah. Go out.
I will say the tang. I think the tang is the 12%.
Could be.
So it is mellowed nice. You would not guess that this is a 12% beer,
No.
by the way. You might guess that it's a 7%.
Yeah.
Because it does have a little bit more. It's a little bit of that twinge, I like to call it. But yeah, are you going to revise your beer review? Your rating, at least.
Yeah, I'm going to give it. So this isn't the best beer I've ever had, but I still would put it at. I'm bumping it up. I like this quite a lot. So I don't know that the best beer I've ever had. It probably goes past a 5-star rating, like if you really get there. But I'm going to say this is a 5-star for me. This is 5 Angus Youngs. I'm enjoying myself.
That's amazing.
And it could be the alcohol talking.
But that's part of what's it called? Oh, it's part of the experience.
It really is. I would pay double for this.
Nice. And I'm actually going to revise mine as well. I'm going to take mine from 3.5. That PSR, it's going up to 4.5.
Nice. Cheers, my friend.
Cheers, my brother.
And everyone watching, till next time, just remember, it's just beer.
And politics.
Like, subscribe, all that.
Yeah, we'll throw stuff up on the screen or something.
That's cool.
12%. We want to thank you guys for watching Beer and Politics. We love you, all of you, and
Especially you.
especially you. You look beautiful tonight.
All right.
Now, we want to put a challenge to you. If you disagree with us, that's fine. And we probably like you for it. But we challenge you. If you think we've gone wrong or we've stepped incorrectly,
Yep.
let us know why.
Yep.
And be specific, because be smarter, that's a bullshit response.
Yep.
If you think we've gone wrong, let us know, and let us know why. And until then, don't forget,
It's just beer.
and politics.
Cheers.
Cheers.